Hello everyone, it's Elizabeth here and welcome to today's Facebook Live session. So hopefully you can see and hear me okay. I am just going to bring up my questions because today we have a special guest who's coming to join us on the broadcast. We have Todd Williams, who is the author of this book, Filling Execution Gaps. This copy is still in its plastic because it is for a giveaway, and I will tell you a little bit more about that later. So I'm just going to ping Todd a note to say that we're live so that he knows to look out so that he can join us. So Facebook Live works on this basis where when somebody is watching the video, then we can invite them to be part of it, and we'll end up having Todd and I both live here on the screen, and I'll be asking him some questions about what strategy execution gaps really are and how all that works. Let me get my questions ready. He and I were chatting earlier on today just to make sure that we had everything lined up for this evening. You might be wondering why I'm doing my Facebook Live session tonight on a Wednesday instead of on Friday afternoons, which is when you normally see me here live in the group. And that is because this Friday I'm speaking at a conference. Todd wants to be in my video. I'm going to approve that and I'm going to add him now. So this Friday I'm speaking at a conference, and it means that I'm not exactly sure what the internet's going to be like from the beginning. So I wanted to make sure that we still had time today to catch up with Todd. And there he is. Hello Todd, we can see you.
I'm just fine. It took a while for the phone to sync up and all that, but eventually we got there, and I'm here, I'm live. We're on the same side of the meridian, so afternoon here, evening there. So we don't have to worry about too much. I could say good afternoon and I'd be correct.
Kind of. We're at 8 o'clock, so it's it's pretty much the end of my working day. But you've got bright sunshine because it's midday for you, isn't it?
Yes. Yep, it's midday. It's just afternoon.
Brilliant. Right, well, thank you very much for joining us today. And I know we spoke a bit earlier, but I haven't given you much of a clue about what I wanted to talk about. So I know that you're Abby. I'll just put you on the spot. Now, I know that one of the things that you've been doing in the group this week is going in and answering some of the questions, because we've had those prompt questions up about strategy execution and what people understand about their strategy. And there was one story in particular that you shared from your book that really spoke to me about how an executive didn't get what they wanted from a meeting because the project manager was presenting the wrong information. Tell us a bit more about that.
Well, actually, that's the first part of 3 different perspectives, because what we have to think about as project managers is we have our perspective on how things are, the executive has their perspective, and the customer, end user, whatever you have for your project, has another perspective, and they're really significantly different. So I just pushed the concept of what I felt many of your people have already seen and felt and maybe had a little bit of pain and suffering around, and that was, you walk into that meeting, it's the same old dry people. I mean, I've been there, I've seen it, I've done it. I know they're not listening. and then you provide all the information and you really think you did good and you answered the wrong question. And it's not just formulating the message to the audience, it's trying to figure out what is their current biggest issue that they have going on. Because they're trying to run a business, and you have this little bit part of it. It's kind of a business inside that bigger business, and now you need to match that up. Well, if today's big topic with the CEO or the board of directors or whoever happens to be return on investment, or it happens to be the quarterly reports that go out to the stock market here in the United States, I'm sure you have a similar type thing, reporting. Then that may be the questions you have to answer. So it's not just how my project fits into that entire organizational goals and strategies, but it's also looking at, it's April or it's the end of March. I wonder if they're going to want to know something about how this is going to hit the bottom line of the organization, because they may be thinking about something very different. Maybe there was just a challenge with a vendor or a customer that made the news, or is made the news, at least in the sphere of that business. You better know that, because that's the type of stuff that's all of a sudden going to come back. and
How do you find
hit
that
you.
out?
How do you find out? Well, part of it is just paying attention to what your company's doing.
Okay.
If your company is actually, right, so in the U.S., I'm going to use U.S. terms, if they're on the stock exchange, just go take a look at their quarterly reports. Find out whenever that news is released. So I guess it's noon. It's hard for me to talk. I was on a project once. Gosh, it was probably in the early 2000s, and I actually did open up the annual report, take a look at that, and my project was second on the list of major risks for the company. And
Wow.
that
Did you know
really,
that before?
no, I did not know that before. I knew it was a risky project. I knew it was in trouble. I mean, that's kind of what I feel in, right? So I knew that it was in trouble, but I had no idea that it was actually in the annual report. And so by looking at that and seeing what they saw as the risk factors, then as I gave my reports to the executives, then I threw in those words. Calm down some of the executives, and some of the stuff didn't calm them down because it wasn't going very well. And so, I was able to get attention, get it focused so that I got the support that I needed. So you can find it out from there. Just listening to your bosses, sometimes reading the paper, which hopefully it doesn't get in the paper, but just kind of seeing what's happening with the organization. If your company is in a new building and hiring a bunch of employees, that's in the paper. It's not bad news, but that could distract your executive sponsors and distract people that are in the room. They're worried about, how your project may fit in with this other big project that they're doing, right? So you keep your ear to the wall and just listen. As project managers, we tend now and then to think about our own little bubble, and we're just an itty bitty bubble in a big tub of bubble bath, right? And there's a lot of, so we got to kind of stand back now and then and take a look at that.
Okay, so staying connected, listening out, being part of the political infrastructure, I suppose, and understanding how, applying all that business acumen that helps you do more than just deliver the project. Yeah.
Well, yeah, I mean, politics is bad. Politics is politics, right? That's what we have to deal with. If you think this is bad, then don't go into business, which would limit your ability to be a project manager pretty quickly. So politics, you just need to understand it. That phrase you use, business acumen, is really significant. It's really important. You need to sit down and study how businesses work and what CEOs, CFOs, etc., are really focused on.
You've just had a little comment from Rebecca who's watching. Just a bubble in a bubble bath. I think people are going to remember that. I certainly will. So
well, at least some of the guys probably don't get into the bubble bath thing, but I got kids, so we're doing that all the time.
So do you think that's the biggest challenge facing project managers who are facing people who are trying to get strategy done? Or are there other things that you think that are big challenges?
Well, a book on it. So I think there's really 6 things that kind of make, kind of are what I'll call the gaps. That was the easiest one to see. I mean, it's really obvious when you walk into a meeting and you're talking about apples, they're talking about oranges. It really slaps you in the face. But there's another gap that I think every project manager who's listening out there will go, and kind of just, yeah. And that's executive sponsors and how engaged executive sponsors are. And that's a huge gap. So, I did some surveys for the book. I did about 350 interviews, surveys, etc. And one of the things I found was that executives in general thought that the executive sponsor role was well-defined, worked well, and no problem. Yet, if I talk to anybody in project management, even in the same company, they were saying just the opposite. I had probably 99% of the people, I've got the stats around somewhere, 99% of the project managers said executive sponsorship is a problem. And not engaged, they don't on, so there's another gap that we see all the time. Things that might be a little less a little less obvious are things like change management. I'm not talking about change control, like your integrated change control that you might have on your PMP, and I forget what it's called in Prince 2, but of managing changes inside the project. I'm talking about building a project. It's going to implement something new, and that's a change. And so who manages that change? So when we deploy it, people actually use it. Some people just call it adoption, right?
Yes.
That's a big, if we're running projects and a project builds a change and we don't have change management in our project, sounds like a gap to me. It sounds like there's a hole there.
No, and I see that every day when I'm talking to people about implementation and delivery, and I'm just, what I'm hearing back is, well, we've done our work, we've delivered the project, but it's not enough, because if you don't do the if you don't take the time to integrate that change and to make it stick, then you're going to end up with people just going back to their old ways, and that investment in that change is not getting you closer to your strategy, because it hasn't had any real long-term effect.
Right. It's what's that old phrase from the 60s in the United States? What if we gave a war and nobody came? Well, that's kind of the same thing. We've done this great thing and nobody used it. It doesn't make a lot of sense to do that. Another area that's huge is governance, and rely a lot on some of the publications over here in the U.S. around that PMI puts out on PMOs and things like that. And PMOs, there's a lot of question about how effective they are. That was part of my post today, was if you have a PMO in your organization, whether it's project, portfolio, whatever the P stands for, because there's a million different Ps. 10. Okay, at least 10.
Project. I use project.
10 million, they're close to one another, right? Not defined, 10 is just the same as a million. That, are they really just filling gaps, some of the gaps I just talked about? Are they really trying to fill a hole that's in the organization whenever it really is somebody else's job to do that?
Yes.
Trying to get our project aligned to the corporate goals and strategies. That's another huge gap. I mean, most people, when I talk to a project manager about what projects what goals does your project address, most of them can't say it. There was a guy by the name of Donald Sull, who he's a professor at MIT. He did a study, and he found out that when he talked to middle managers, that 45% of middle managers, only 45%, could name one of the top 5 business strategies or business goals of the company. As a middle manager, you're probably reporting to a middle manager, and if that person doesn't know the goals of the company, how's your project ever going to line up?
No, exactly.
Right? So there's another, right? So that's another one. And the last one, I think the last big one is leadership. And there's a quote by Peter Senge, which I can't recite off the top of my head, but basically he says, the problem with the word leadership is it's been totally abused in the organization. We talk about the organization's leadership. What we're really talking about is the senior executives. And it starts to taint how people think about leadership. And well, I'm just a project manager. I'm not leadership, which isn't just totally false. It just kind of poisons the organization. And what you really need to have is understand what the leadership structure is, from the CEO all the way down to the individual contributor. I make a point in the book a number of times that the best, strongest, most exciting, impressive leader is the architect or the business analyst who's actually leading the customer away from what they say they want to what they really need, because they have absolute authority. They're at the bottom of the rung, so to speak. They're an individual contributor, and if they can lead the customer to the solution that they actually need, that is leadership at its finest. And that's the type of leadership I'm talking about throughout the entire stack of the organization.
Okay. Michael's just left a comment, so perhaps we could pick up that. Change, he says, change may or may not be an agreed deliverable, and that needs to be agreed from the start. The project may just produce a deliverable that may or may not be accepted. So I suppose that's an interesting point. If from what we were talking about from change management, perhaps there are projects where actually change management is not a big part, because the project itself doesn't have the role of delivering long-term change, it's just producing an output. My view of that is that I think things are changing, and I think a lot of the projects that we do now should be responsible for delivering the change management as well as deliverable. But what do you think?
So Michael, what I would say to that is the reason we run a project is to change something, right? If we're not changing something, making it better, making it bluer, making it pinker, faster, more efficient, if our project isn't changing something, then there's no reason to run a project. In fact, the word project comes from the word to project, like in projectile, to throw something forward. And that's really what a project is trying to do, is to try to move something forward in some way, shape, or form. So I may have a project that creates a new product, in NPD with a new product development project. And so I'm creating a new widget. Maybe it's a new pen here that we're going to put out on the market. So yes, my job is just to, as in the project, is just to create this. But if this pen isn't accepted by end users, which generally belongs in the marketing department, they're the ones who do that. If it isn't accepted, the project was a waste of time. We lost massive money for the company. So I would say that every project has a change component, regardless of how you look at it. And I'd love to have that conversation. If you want to take it offline, hit me up on Facebook, and we can just have that conversation for the rest of the day. But I think every project has a component of change in it, and we need to be cognizant of that.
And if we don't document it in the charter to say that actually it's something that is required for the project. Okay, so I think we probably can come back to that, or like you say, we can pick it up in the comments later. So you've talked a lot about the challenges, but what are things that project managers can actually do to help? Because, you know, we can't necessarily influence company policy or change the way portfolio management works in our businesses. Can we do anything?
Well, okay, so this takes creativity. Because yes, some of these things are bigger than us, and we can't say things, you know, how do we all of a sudden put together a strategy? I had someone, I think it was in your thread, ask about strategy. How do we get strategy, right? And we're just down here at the bottom level of the company. How do we get it? Well, one trick that I do, and I do it all the time, is I go into an organization and I find out they don't have a strategy. So, or they don't map it out, or it's not well known. And I just ask a bunch of questions and I put it together. And I say, oh, here's what I think it is. And I'll maybe put a strategy map together. If you know what a strategy map is, it's looking at the financial, customer, internal, and growth and business items that need to be achieved to get to the goals. And I'll put that together and I'll sit it in front of somebody and I say, here, take a look at this. Is this what we're trying to do? And they say, no, that's not what we're doing. I don't know where the heck you came up with that. And let's see, there's one around here somewhere, I think. And I hand him one of these. Let me grab one. Okay. It's my trusty red pen. Okay. We're into pens today. And I say, oh, would you please change it for me? And allow them to actually grab that document, start changing it to make it make more sense. And what I just did is I got the requirements that I needed, right? So I redo it and I kind of promote that to somebody else and somebody else, and I start getting the pieces all together. And quite often I will either get the actual strategy that needs to be done, or the strategy map or balanced scorecard type concept that I need, or what I end up with is a discrepancy where one group thinks we're doing A and another group thinks we're doing B. And now I found a real problem I can go address and solve and get things squared away.
But you're a consultant, so it makes perfect sense. But I think as a consultant coming into a business, you have a ability to do that, to get in front of the right people, to ask the questions, to be challenged. You're paid for that kind of support. But as a normal, in inverted, air quotes, project manager, makes me look like a rabbit there. I didn't mean to be rabbit ears project manager. But as a normal employee, my chain of command is not such that I can go and sit down with the marketing director and say, well, what do you think our strategy is? I mean, I can ask my own chain of command those questions and and my project sponsor to get a strategy outlined or a vision for my project. But I don't really see how I could take it further than that.
So I think you can't. I've actually given that advice to a few hundred people, and none of them have gotten fired yet. Okay, so who knows? Maybe this first, but you know, you do it. Yes, as a consultant, I can do that really quickly. Walk in, draw this out, and say, "Hey, I think we have a problem here." As an employee, you're doing it very differently. You're kind of like, and I think I said it in that response, and I believe it was in your thread. In that, it was to Mohammed, and I said to him, you know, tell them, hey, this is a growth experience for me. I'd like to put this together to see how it is. You have to find your allies. You have to, you know, I mean, we should all have mentors. So maybe it's one of those mentors that you have, and you're sitting down with that mentor and saying, this is what I've put together. This is what I think. And that person turns around and corrects it. But yes, you have to create a safe environment. I come in with, I wouldn't call it a safe environment, but I come in kind of a honeymoon period where I can say a lot of things at the very, very beginning. It's not safe because, of course, if I do the wrong thing, you know, I'm expendable, very expendable. And so you do have to create a safe environment and then move things forward to there. It's not something you're going to do nearly as fast as a consultant would do it. This may take you 3-6 months. Maybe even longer. But I think it's very doable, and I know a number of people who have done it.
I think it's very doable, and I'm thinking on my feet, but as a PMO manager, I think you've got perfect remit to be having these conversations. So there's
as a PMO, depending on the type of PMO, but as a PMO manager, yes. If you're a PMO manager that's just preaching methodology, no. If you're a PMO manager that's trying to drive projects and keep them aligned, yeah, this is well within your bailiwick, well within your bounds of scope.
Okay. So you put quite a lot of thought and effort. You talked about 350 interviews and everything, and your book is very comprehensive, lots of pages. What was the funniest thing or the strangest thing that you came across when you were doing putting it together?
So the funniest one, the one that left me somewhat speechless, was I was talking about executive sponsorship, and I was talking to a person that I had worked with in the past in another company, and she knew me quite well. And I said to her, so who is accountable for the project? And she said, the project results. And she said, well, the project manager is accountable. And I said, well, wait a minute. The project manager doesn't make decisions. How can the project manager be accountable? Shouldn't it be an executive sponsor? And her response to me was, executive sponsors are far too high up in the organization to be accountable.
What are they for then? They're just decoration.
I said to her, would you repeat that? Because I think I wrote it down wrong. And she repeated it. And I said, do you understand what you're saying? And she goes, yeah. She goes, but you know, you've been here. You know what it's like. They're not going to be accountable. And that was one of the funniest and biggest revelations. The other was in the same line. Whenever I was talking about executive sponsorship and I was interviewing people, I started the interview process looking at just healthcare. And I came up with a few interesting things in healthcare that I wasn't aware of. So I decided I would hop over into a general world of business. And so I did a bunch of other interviews in general business. And one thing came out that was really, really exciting to me, and that is that in healthcare, if you have an executive sponsor and you're in the process of picking an executive sponsor, for the most part, do not pick a clinician. If you pick a clinician, you pick a doctor or a nurse, okay, your project's going to fail. It has like a 90% chance of failure, okay?
No comment.
With of oncology, if you pick an oncologist as a project sponsor, then oncology works. And this took a little bit for me to figure out exactly why this was the case. You need your sponsor to be able to come to you and say, Elizabeth or Michael or Mohammed, do you realize you got some risk here? You need to address this risk. I see this coming. It's, you know, or maybe just saying, hey, let's go out for a cup of coffee and let's sit down and talk about your project, see what's going on, right? You need a sponsor who's going to do that. When was the last time your doctor called up and said, let's go out for a cup of coffee? Let's do anything where your doctor was reaching out proactively. It's very, very rare, right? They're waiting for you to come in. They're very episodic. You come in, they fix the problem, and you're out. So if you know you have a problem, you can go to your executive sponsor, who's a clinician, and they might fix it. The odds are, though, it's usually too late by the time you figured it out, and you needed their help a lot sooner than that, right? If they don't see emergency room, blood, death, dying, imminent, okay, they're not going to be as reactive as other sponsors. In oncology, the interaction between the patient and the doctor is years long. As I had pointed out to me yesterday I was talking to a doctor, and he said, well, in a good case, it's years long. If you do things right, the oncology visit takes years. And I said, but the thing is these oncologists then do have to call you up, or if they don't call you up, their assistant, right? One of their medical assistants call you up and say, how are you feeling? How did that chemo work? How did that radiation work? You know, there's a whole bunch of interaction that goes on, and they're mapping out a very long project with a oncology patient. And so they're used to that concept. And so oncology clinicians worked much better as sponsors than non. And I'm sure that would work for infectious disease and any other long interacted condition between physician and patient, that those physicians, or clinicians, I should say, would make better sponsors.
How interesting.
So that was an interesting one. That was the one that was like the real eye-opener for me. And I thought it was pretty cool.
Yes. No, I would never have, you know, I can see the more people that you talk to, the more projects in healthcare that you investigate, the more you would have uncovered things like that. And that's, really, that's a really interesting tidbit about people working in healthcare. Anyway, I feel like I've taken up quite a lot of your time this evening. So I just wanted to say thank you very much, really, for coming in and being with us in the group. And I know that you're around for the next couple of days as well for any more questions that we might have. And
I'm gonna try to stay on social media a little bit more, so I might be in your group even long beyond this and helping out and posting and comments. So I'm trying to, at least.
Well, we'd love to have you. And for anybody who would like to get this lovely, still in its plastic, I have a copy of my own that I've read that is not in plastic, but this one is fresh from the publisher, ready to be a giveaway prize for somebody. So look out on my blog on the 26th of February, and it goes to girlsguidepm.com on the 26th of February will be all the information about how to get your hands on a copy of Filling Execution Gaps by the wonderful Todd. So thank you very much, Rebecca, Michael, for joining us live, and good morning in Australia as well, and good night to everybody else, and thank you. Good afternoon to you, Todd.
Good morning, Rebecca. Goodbye, and we'll catch you all here.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. See you in the next video.